exam. So what they need somebody to transport them through it. And what was the most expensive form of transport that you could get? It was a kind of open carriage around called a coach. And that's where the word coaching came from. And then we got coaches in sport. So tennis and beginning with rugby, with rowing. And the rowing coaches, there was a great debate in the literature. Was it fair for one team to have a coach and the other not? And then it got spread into tennis and other forms of learning. Eventually, we see this very directive form of coaching originating until we get to Timothy Galway, who went out to India and smoked a lot of pot and then came back and basically came up with the idea that maybe people have got the answers in themselves. So now we suddenly started seeing something different called coaching. And along came a lot of people who said, I can make some money out of this. And so we got the business coach arriving. And the business coaches then started to say, hang on a minute, there are these people called mentors who are doing what we're doing, but they're doing it for free. And so the idea that mentors are directive, mentors give you advice, it's not true. Hasn't been historically true. Yeah. So basically, mentors give you context to help you with the quality of your thinking. They don't give you advice because advice is doing the thinking for you. And in the research that we're doing with the Coach Maturity Research Group, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute, what we're seeing is the data tell us the more mature coaches become, the more they blend coaching and mentoring, the more they use their own experience. And so this is something that's quite difficult to encompass within some of the models of coaching that we see around the world and the credentialing processes. But I'm not here to get too deeply into that. So then we suddenly had supervision. And we realized that we were playing with people's lives. We needed to actually make sure that the ethical boundaries were maintained. We needed to make sure that people felt secured. Looking after yourself as a coach, as a mentor, became fundamental to effective practice. And then, so it really, in the 90s, we were talking about the identity of coach, identity of mentor, and then gradually, we started to introduce these competencies and accreditations and so forth. And of course, EMCC started the process. And then other bodies followed through. And that's great, it's fine, we were there to run. And then we move into the 20s, and we're talking more about the 10s and the 20s. We accredited programs. So the ISMCP, the International Standards of Coaching, Mentoring Coaching Programs, that was a starting point. How do we know that a program to train coaches or mentors or supervisors is actually valid and useful? And now, I think we're in the age of recalibration. Everything is changing. I'm not going to go on about AI. I will mention it as we go, but you've heard a lot about AI. And AI is tremendous. And I'm going to show you a few things as we go along. But basically, we are in a completely different world, and we have to adapt to it. And see that these are some of the critical challenges. There are too many coaches in the world. And the oversupply means that it's very difficult to make a living in it. They're much more difficult to make a living. Some of the organisations like Better Up, for example, that aim to talk about democratising coaching, I'll come to that in a while, but if you are basically making coaching too cheap, you're not necessarily doing a great service to people. It's one thing to make it more available to people, but if you keep devaluing it, then you take people, then that's a problem in itself. And when I say cheap, my thought, when I think of democratising coaching, I'm thinking of the headmaster in a school that I encountered and support in Uganda. The kids don't have shoes. They have to stay in the school for during the week, and they sleep in bunk beds, 3 to a bed, bunk bed. They can't afford Better Up or anybody else's thing. So there's a whole world out there that needs coaching and mentoring. And part of our mission, I believe, as the EMCC is to help create that whole process. So one of the things that we've been doing, that we are now in the process of rolling out and coming to a conclusion how we're going to do it. We spent over the last 3 or 4 years, we've been developing a whole program to teach school kids how to be coaches and mentors. Our objective is to get 5 million school-age coaches and mentors across the world as a starting point. And we'll be engaging with each of the national bodies in the EMCC about how do we do this. And eventually we want to make it wider and wider. You know, why not every school? Why shouldn't every kid learn the skills of coaching and mentoring to help them make their careers more effective and so forth? So all of these other things, the move to internal coaching and mentoring, there are far more internal coaches and mentors than external. This is accreditation inflation. We see this quite widely. Somebody gets their first accreditation as a coach, and then they see that, well, actually, I could get more busy potentially if I got my next level. So 6 months later, they apply to become whatever the next level is. Then we've tried to resist this in the EMCC, and I'm glad that we've been doing this, because if you are simply going in getting collecting accreditations from a financial perspective, you're not doing any learning on the process, or much less learning. And I think accreditation inflation is one of the big dangers that we have to fight back against. There's a load of unevidenced practice out there. I often take tilt at things like Patrick Lencioni's stuff. No evidence behind it whatsoever. Or models like the Tuckman model in team coaching, forming, storming, norming, performing. Only 2% of teams, when the study actually go through the storming phase. It's complete nonsense. But there's so much stuff out there, and part of the EMC's original foundation principles were 2 principles. One was research and evidence-based, and the other was basically diversity. So looking and allowing for all sorts of different approaches globally into what we do. So you can see there's a whole bunch of things here. The ethical competence is an interesting one. We're doing a study right now and paused by part of this study, where we're looking at the training of coaches in ethicality. And it's not enough just to say, well, here's a bunch of code of practice, you just stick to that. That doesn't teach you ethical awareness. So one of our big challenges for the future is how do we create a profession which is really highly ethically competent? And there's a lot to be said about that. So democratization, decolonisation, the idea, in one of the chapters of one of the Sage Handbook that we have, one of the authors there of the chapters from the United States opened up his chapter with the comment, and of course, one of the difficulties that we have is that coaching was developed in the West, or particularly in the United States. So we're thinking, has this guy never been to China or India or wherever? The idea that there's one way of doing things and it's a Western way, it's not accurate. We have to embrace that diversity. And all of this stuff, I'm going to talk about technology and I'm going to talk about complexity, so let's not bother to go anything there. I like this question. Suppose it's one we should ask ourselves regularly. Suppose what we knew, everything we knew was wrong. What would that mean? How many of you have a habit, say once a month, of going up and questioning, finding an assumption that you hold deeply and questioning it? One or two of you, it's great. Because it's actually actively looking to question our assumptions. It's a great discipline to do. And so we need to be doing this as a profession and as a professional body as well. So we've got AI. The AI can do the doing better than we can. It can fake empathy better as well. But it can't replicate being. It can't care. It can't feel. And so we have to bring our humanity to make it different. So what we're seeing is all that basic coaching, the grow model coaching, and those of you who've heard me before will know that grow in my view stands for get rich on waffle.